So listen, most economists still believe that we are not, I repeat, we are not headed towards a recession. But in recent weeks, little by little, you start seeing these individuals, these economists, and recently even banks that are saying, you know what, we see some data out here that would indicate that we're headed towards a recession. So let's see how this would play into the real estate industry, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Jerome and Real Estate. I'm Jerome, your local realtor here in the Fountain and Colorado Springs area. Let's talk about this recession fear. So, as far as you know, recession as a whole goes, there is some data out there that would cause for a little bit of alarm, right? So inflation is at a 40-year high. There's no way around it, and the Fed is actively trying to fight that by raising rates. Okay, just today, when I was taping this, the CPI numbers came out. That's the Consumer Price Index, and we're at 8.5% for March closing. Okay, 8.5%. That's huge. That's a huge jump. And in order to combat that, our rates are actually expected to continue rising in order to sort of fight off that inflation, right? So you're not going to really see a drop in rates, especially mortgage rates. So mortgage rates currently, as of 11 April, they were sitting at right around like 5.07%. And that's predicted to continue moving up as the Fed keeps raising their rates to fight off inflation, right? So the trouble here is, when you try to fight off inflation by raising these rates, that's when recession fears come up, is because people believe that the Fed will overshoot their mark and they'll actually start hurting the economy, which leads into a recession. That's how this usually plays out. According to a recent CNBC poll, 81% of US adults are worried about the recession right now. Even though most economists are not worried about it, 81% of adults are actually worried about it. So, all right. And then I mentioned earlier on that, there are some banks coming out now kind of saying the same thing, right? So Deutsche Bank was one of the first ones that came out and said, yeah, you know what? There's some data out here that might indicate recession is in the works. The renowned investor, Kathy Wood, actually predicted that before Deutsche Bank came out, right? So more and more economists are starting to come out of the woodworks and saying, yeah, we don't know, recession might be, a thing for the future, for the upcoming future. So how do you prepare for a recession? If you are one of those that believes that a recession's about to hit and it's about to hit a little bit hard, how do you help yourself? Well, there are some general rules, and one of them is to trim down your costs and expenditures, right? That's just a general rule of thumb. The next one is to start increasing the funding that you're putting to your emergency funds and your savings. Okay, you want to start stashing cash, and that's twofold. One is for emergencies. You stash it for emergencies, and then the other thing is, if you have enough and you're capable of doing this, this is the time that you stash away cash for when things tank. Let's say the recession does hit and everything tanks. All of a sudden you've got this extra cash that you can now buy up cheap assets with, which sometime down the line will start rising again, and you just ended up buying it for cheap. But that's besides the point, right? So boosting your emergency funds, stashing the cash away, and then also you want to try and stay away from volatile or extremely risky investments. And it's kind of up to you to figure out what you would determine to be risky investments, right? There's the general thought is out there, but that's an individual thing based on your risk management. Now, I mean, what we're here to really talk about though isn't just recession and inflation overall. What we're here to talk about is more so how this would affect the real estate industry. And I believe it's important to kind of think about all of this in context. I think when we hear the word recession now, we're kind of thinking about what happened in 2008, that Great Recession is what we were calling it, right? So what was going on then, and is it comparable to what's going on right now? Back then, what actually ended up causing the recession back then kind of was the real estate industry coupled with the mortgage industry, right? We had a whole bunch of bad loans going on in 2008 and right before that, right? We had completely over leveraged borrowers, and then also, of course, we had lenders who were giving out these subprime loans, right? And subprime loans means, you're giving out loans to people can't afford it, right? And since then, though, has it been corrected? I believe so. Most of those issues have been corrected. If you've tried getting a mortgage in those years since the recession, you realize very clearly that there are a whole bunch of rules that have been put in place to stop people from getting loans, especially if they're not able to pay on them, right? So that whole subprime lending kind of went out the window. There have been a whole bunch more regulations and policies put in place to help the real estate industry remain stable, right? We'll see if it works out long term. But this time around, what's happening, right? This is not something we're not going to be able to pinpoint the real estate industry and the mortgage industry if there is a recession. We're not going to be able to say, well, the real estate industry caused this and then everything blew up. And then if there is a recession, are we going to see a whole bunch of over leveraged borrowers? And the answer is it doesn't seem to be the case, right? There are not tons and tons of over leveraged borrowers at this point. There's not a whole bunch of subprime lending going on. Turns out that there are quite a few. The majority of borrowers right now can handle their mortgages. So I don't think that we would see that complete tanking of the real estate industry if a recession were to hit, right? Banks are still extremely cautious and picky about who they lend to right now. The other thing to think about, and this is a big one, is just the normal supply and demand, right? What's supply and demand looking like right now? Well, it's looking demand heavy, right? Millennials are, in my opinion, the biggest reason for that. Okay, they pretty much outnumber every other generation right now. And millennials are in the ages of 26 to 41, and that's pretty much prime age for purchasing a house, especially the first home, right? That's that prime age range where they're going to be thinking about purchasing homes, and they want them, right? So back to the population though, so millennials account for right around like 72 million in the US right now. Gen X, my generation, the best generation, accounts for about 65 million. And then baby boomers account for about 71 million. So normally I'm thinking what you would see is the baby boomer generation should be at that point where they're looking to downsize, they're looking to sell, and the millennials are right in that age range where they should be looking to buy, right? Problem is we're not seeing the baby boomers and the Gen Xers just massively selling their homes, right? They're not giving them up. But the millennials are 100% after buying homes like they should be, right? I remember, back a few years ago, we all had this thought in our head. You would see these articles pop up talking about how, well, millennials aren't going to buy homes. They're just a little bit too lazy to think about that. They're not thinking about their futures and stuff like that. What they're probably going to end up doing, they're going to jump in their motorhomes and they're going to, drive across the country and live in their little motorhomes and stuff. They're also going to go backpacking across Europe and blah, blah, blah. And basically what the millennials have done throughout these few years is they've said, no, that is not what we're going to be doing at all. We want the chance to use the greatest wealth generator in history as well. We want to buy real estate. And they are doing it in droves, right? So, strangely enough, they've surprised all of us, and that demand is still continuing. It hasn't really weakened that much, okay? So the big problem is their supply isn't there. They don't have a whole bunch of homes out on the market for them to get, which is part of the reason why real estate is kind of skyrocketing right now, okay? Construction of new homes has slowed. It has not been able to keep pace. Even if you took out the whole factor of millennials wanting to buy so many homes, construction has not kept pace. Even if you take that out, they're just well below average, right? So that is sort of a problem, but when we look at it and in the backdrop of, will this recession really hurt and tank real estate prices? Now you kind of understand why it's not going to hit that hard, is because supply and demand still rules, okay? Millennials are still out there wanting the houses, and there's just not enough supply. So the price decrease that you might expect may not happen quite as harshly, or it might not happen at all, okay? We might start to level off, but in my opinion, I don't think we're going to be seeing a reversal in home prices. And keep in mind, even though mortgage rates are moving up, right, steadily, we're increasing mortgage rates due to the Fed hiking overall rates. We're still technically at historic lows for mortgage rates. And I do have a video on that, which I'll link in the description of this particular video. But you might want to check that out and see that, 5% mortgage rates are still historically low for all time, right? Now, having said all this, it is... You do still need to take everything individually, right? Everyone's individual situation is different. And real estate is extremely sensitive to rate changes, right? We've also been appreciating at a blistering pace, right? So for a few years now, we've just had huge appreciation. And everybody knows that just can't continue forever. At some point, it's got to slow, it's got to level off. When is that going to be? Who knows, right? So even though I'm saying, the recession, if there is one, it may not tank the prices, you do need to take into account things like, well, we've been skyrocketing with real estate prices for so long. How long can it continue? And what's my personal risk? Thinking about that. So everybody needs to bite off exactly what they can chew. Do not try to jump into something that you're not ready for. You definitely need to sit down and chat with somebody who can kind of walk you through the process and help you understand what situation you're actually in. Every single individual is going to be different. So that is going to sort of wrap up where I think, what I think would happen if, there is a recession. Is there going to be one? Who knows? Economists aren't exactly split down the middle right now. Most economists still say that there will not be one. But little by little, you need to pay attention to the news. You do have several economists coming out, and you do have several pretty, intelligent investors that are saying they're seeing the signs as well. So just keep that all in mind. Listen, if you like this video and you like the content, please give it a like and then subscribe so you don't miss my weekly content. All right, we'll catch you later.